The sound of breaking glass echoed through the dusty streets of Opal, Wyoming, followed by the crash of splintering wood as Faye Davidson tumbled backward through the saloon side door, landing hard in the dirt alley between buildings. Blood trickled from her split lip, but she pushed herself up on trembling arms, bracing for the inevitable blow that would follow. Her employer, a cruel-faced woman named Martha Stern who ran the saloon's kitchen, stood in the doorway with eyes like frozen stones. "You stupid girl. That was my best serving tray. Get out. You're finished here," Martha spat before slamming the door shut with such force that dust rained down from the building's weathered facade. Faye sat there in the dirt, her worn brown dress now covered in filth, and felt nothing. The loss of yet another job should have terrified her, should have brought tears or panic, or some desperate scramble to beg for another chance. Instead, she felt only the familiar numbness that had been her constant companion since she was 14 years old, when her parents had died of fever on the wagon train west. That was 6 years ago now, in 1878, and she had learned to expect nothing from life except hardship. She stood slowly, testing her ankle which had twisted in the fall, and retrieved the small bundle of her belongings from behind the crates where she had hidden them. It was always wise to keep your things close when you had so few of them, and even fewer people who cared whether you lived or died. The bundle contained one spare dress, equally worn, a small leather pouch with the $17 she had managed to save over 3 years, and a tin photograph of her parents, their faces stern and unsmiling as was the fashion. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as Faye limped out of the alley onto the main street of Opal. The town was small but prosperous, having grown up around the railroad that had come through 5 years earlier. Cattle ranchers from the surrounding territory drove their herds here for shipping east, and the town had all the businesses that came with such commerce. The saloon, a general store, a livery, a bank, a hotel, a church, and a scattering of other establishments. Faye had worked in most of them at one point or another over the past year since arriving in Opal. She had been a maid at the hotel until the owner's son had cornered her in a back room, and she had fought him off, resulting in her immediate dismissal. She had worked at the laundry until the steam from the boiling water had caused her to faint one particularly hot day, and they told her she was too weak for the work. She had cleaned the church until the pastor's wife accused her of stealing a silver candlestick that later turned up in the woman's own cupboard, but by then, Faye was already gone. The pattern was always the same. Something would go wrong, through her fault or not, and she would find herself out on the street again. "Happiness is for other people," she whispered to herself, a mantra she had repeated so many times it had worn grooves in her mind. "People with families and homes and futures. Not for girls like me." She walked toward the edge of town, knowing she would need to find shelter before nightfall. The nights were growing cold now that September had arrived, and sleeping outdoors was becoming dangerous. Perhaps she could find a corner in someone's barn, or maybe the church would let her sleep on a pew if she promised to sweep the floors in the morning. As she passed the general store, she noticed a piece of paper tacked to the post outside, fluttering in the breeze. Jobs were sometimes posted there, and though she expected nothing, she paused to read it out of habit. Help wanted at the Dancing E Ranch, cook and housekeeper needed, room and board provided, inquire with Ezra Xanders. Faye stared at the notice, her mind working through the implications. The Dancing E Ranch was about 5 miles outside of town. She had heard people mention it. A cattle ranch, moderately successful from what she understood, run by a man she had never met. The position offered room and board, which meant she would have a roof over her head and meals, assuming she could get the job. But she had been a cook's assistant at the saloon for only 3 months, and before that, her cooking experience was limited to the basic trail food her mother had taught her. Still, what choice did she have? She carefully removed the notice from the post and tucked it into her bundle. The ranch was 5 miles away. She could walk it before dark if she started now and did not rest. Her ankle protested with each step, but Faye had long ago learned to ignore physical discomfort. Pain was just another constant in life, like hunger and loneliness and disappointment. The road out of Opal wound through grasslands that stretched endlessly toward distant mountains, their peaks already touched with early snow. The land here was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way that matched Faye's view of the world. Beauty existed, but not for her. It was something to observe from a distance, never to touch or possess. As she walked, she passed other ranches, their gates marked with wooden signs bearing names she could not always read, her education having been cut short when her parents died. She knew her letters well enough to get by, but long words still gave her trouble. Cattle grazed behind split-rail fences, their dark shapes moving slowly across the gold and green landscape. The sun was sinking toward the horizon when she finally spotted the gate marking the Dancing E Ranch. The sign was well made, the letters carved deep and painted black against pale wood. Beyond the gate, a dirt road led up a gentle rise to where several buildings clustered together. A ranch house, a large barn, several smaller outbuildings, and corrals where she could see horses moving. Faye stood at the gate for a long moment, gathering her courage. She had been rejected so many times that the thought of facing it again made her stomach clench with dread. But night was coming, and she had nowhere else to go. She opened the gate, closed it carefully behind her, and began the long walk up the road to the ranch house. As she approached, she could hear sounds of activity: horses whinnying, cattle lowing in the distance, the clang of metal on metal from what might be a blacksmith's forge. Several men were working in the corrals, their figures silhouetted against the setting sun. One of them noticed her approach and called out something she could not hear. Another man, taller than the first, turned to look in her direction. Faye stopped about 20 yards from the main house, suddenly uncertain. The house itself was larger than she had expected, a 2-story structure of whitewashed wood with a wide porch wrapping around the front and side. Curtains hung in the windows, and smoke rose from the chimney. It looked like a home, a real home, the kind she had not known since she was a child. The tall man from the corral was walking toward her now, and as he drew closer she could make out his features in the fading light. He was perhaps 25 or 26 years old, with dark hair that needed cutting and sun-bronzed skin that spoke of long days outdoors. He wore the practical clothing of a working rancher: canvas trousers, a blue cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled up, a leather vest, and scuffed boots. But what struck Faye most was his face. He was smiling. It was not a polite smile or a mocking smile or any of the other kinds of smiles she had learned to read and mistrust. It was a genuine smile of welcome, as if her arrival was a pleasant surprise rather than an inconvenience. His eyes, a warm brown color, held no suspicion or calculation, only open friendliness. "Hello there," he called out as he approached, his voice carrying easily across the distance. "Can I help you with something?" Faye held up the crumpled notice, her voice coming out rougher than she intended. "I came about the job. The posting said to inquire with Ezra Xanders." "Well, you found him," the man said, extending his hand as he reached her. "Ezra Xanders, owner of the Dancing E, and you are Faye Davidson." She hesitated before taking his hand, unused to such courteous treatment. His grip was firm but gentle, calloused from work but careful not to squeeze too hard. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Davidson. You walked all the way from town." His smile faded into concern as he noticed her limp and the dirt on her dress. "Are you hurt?" "I am fine," Faye said automatically, pulling her hand back. "About the job, I can cook and clean. I worked at the saloon in town until today." Ezra's eyebrows rose slightly. "Until today? What happened, if you do not mind my asking?" Faye considered lying, but what was the point? He would find out eventually or make assumptions of his own. "I dropped a serving tray and broke it. My employer dismissed me." She waited for the dismissal, the polite rejection, the suggestion that she try somewhere else. Instead, Ezra nodded thoughtfully. "Accidents happen. I broke 3 plates just last week trying to cook dinner for my ranch hands. Nearly burned down the kitchen the week before that. That is why I need a cook." His smile returned, and Faye noticed it reached his eyes, crinkling the corners in a way that suggested he smiled often. "You are not going to send me away?" The question came out before she could stop it, revealing too much of her desperation. Ezra's expression softened. "Why would I do that? You came all this way to apply for a job I am desperate to fill. Come on up to the house and let us talk properly. You must be tired and hungry." He turned and began walking toward the house, clearly expecting her to follow. Faye did, limping behind him and trying to process this unexpected turn of events. In her experience, kindness always came with conditions, with expectations of something in return. She wondered what Ezra Xanders would want from her, and how long it would take for his friendly demeanor to reveal its true purpose. The porch steps creaked under their feet as they climbed to the front door. Ezra held it open for her, another gesture of courtesy that made Faye suspicious. Inside, the house was warm and surprisingly tidy for a bachelor establishment. The main room served as both sitting area and dining space, with a large stone fireplace against one wall and a substantial wooden table surrounded by chairs. Doorways led to what she assumed were a kitchen and other rooms. "Please sit down," Ezra said, gesturing to one of the chairs at the table. "Let me get you some water, or coffee if you prefer. Fair warning, my coffee is terrible. I always make it too strong or too weak, never quite right." "Water is fine," Faye said, lowering herself carefully into the chair. Her ankle throbbed, and now that she had stopped walking, exhaustion was setting in. Ezra disappeared through a doorway and returned moments later with a glass of water and a plate containing bread, cheese, and sliced apples. He set both in front of her. "Please help yourself. Dinner will not be for a while yet, and you look like you could use something now." Faye stared at the food, her stomach cramping with hunger. She had not eaten since breakfast, and that had been only a small piece of bread. But accepting food felt like accepting charity, like admitting weakness. Then again, she was weak. Weak and tired and hungry and homeless. Pretending otherwise was foolish. She ate slowly, trying to maintain some dignity while Ezra sat down across from her. He did not watch her eat, which she appreciated. Instead, he gazed out the window at the darkening landscape. "I inherited this ranch from my uncle 2 years ago," he said conversationally. "He never married, no children, and I was his favorite nephew. I had been working on a ranch down in Colorado, learning the trade, when word came that he had passed. He left everything to me, the land, the cattle, the horses, all of it." Faye swallowed a bite of bread. "That was fortunate for you." "It was," Ezra agreed, "though it came with challenges." The ranch had been struggling for a few years. "My uncle was a good man but not the best businessman. I have spent the past 2 years building it back up, increasing the herd, improving the facilities. It has been hard work but satisfying. I love this land, this life." There was genuine joy in his voice, and Faye found herself watching him with something like curiosity. She had never met anyone who seemed so genuinely happy with their circumstances. Most people she encountered were tired or angry or resigned to their lot. Ezra seemed to radiate contentment. "I have 6 full-time ranch hands," Ezra continued. "Good men, hard workers. But none of them can cook worth a damn, pardon my language. We have been taking turns making meals and the results have been disastrous. Burned stew, raw biscuits, coffee that could strip paint. The men are starting to grumble, and I cannot blame them. A man cannot work all day on bad food." He turned his attention back to Faye, his expression earnest. "I need someone who can cook 3 meals a day for 7 men, including myself. Also, the house needs regular cleaning, laundry done, that sort of thing. In exchange, I can offer a private room in the house, all meals, and $35 a month in wages. 1 day off per week, your choice of which day. Does that sound acceptable?" Faye set down the piece of cheese she had been holding. $35 a month was more than she had ever earned. At the saloon, she had been making $20 a month and paying 8 of that for a tiny room above the livery. This offer included room and board and more money. It was too good to be true, which meant there had to be a catch. "Why are you offering me this job?" she asked bluntly. "You know nothing about me except that I got fired today. You have not asked for references or proof that I can actually cook. You have not even asked if I can read or write or keep accounts." Ezra leaned back in his chair, considering her question seriously. "Those are fair points. Can you read and write? Well enough to get by. Can you cook for 7 hungry men? I think so. I helped in the saloon kitchen, and before my parents died, my mother taught me how to make most basic meals." "Then you have the skills I need," Ezra said simply. "As for why I am offering you the job without more questions, well, call it instinct. You walked 5 miles on an injured ankle to apply for a position. That shows determination. You are honest about being fired rather than making up a story. That shows character. And frankly, Miss Davidson, you look like you could use a break." The last statement, delivered with such gentle kindness, nearly broke through Faye's carefully maintained walls. She felt her throat tighten and had to look away, blinking hard. "I do not need pity." "I am not offering pity," Ezra said, his voice still gentle but firm. "I am offering a job to someone who needs one. There is a difference. If you cannot do the work, that will become clear soon enough and we can part ways. But I think you can. And I think you will." Faye looked back at him, studying his face for any sign of deception or hidden motives. She found none. Either he was an excellent liar, or he was exactly what he appeared to be, a kind man offering help. The possibility that genuine kindness might exist in the world felt dangerous to believe in. "When would I start?" she asked. Ezra's face lit up with that brilliant smile again. "Tonight, if you are willing. I will show you to your room, let you rest and clean up, and tomorrow morning you can start with breakfast. Or if you are too tired tonight, tomorrow is fine too, whatever you prefer." "Tonight," Faye said. "I would like to start tonight." "Excellent." Ezra stood, his enthusiasm palpable. "Let me show you the kitchen first, so you know what you have to work with, then I will take you upstairs to your room." He led her through the doorway into a spacious kitchen that was, as he had indicated, something of a disaster. Dirty pots and pans were stacked by a large basin. The stove had spills and burns marking its surface, and the general disarray suggested several men attempting to cook with no real knowledge of how to do so. But the kitchen itself was well equipped with a good cast iron stove, plenty of pots and pans once they were cleaned, a large work table, and shelves stocked with basic supplies. "The root cellar is through that door," Ezra said, pointing to a door at the back of the kitchen. "We keep potatoes, onions, carrots, that sort of thing down there. The smokehouse is just outside with bacon, ham, and whatever beef we have prepared. We have chickens, Sow fresh eggs every day. Milk from our dairy cows. We slaughter a steer for beef every few weeks. And I keep an account at the general store in town for anything else you might need. Just give them a list and they will deliver it once a week." Faye nodded, taking it all in. This was far better than the cramped saloon kitchen where she had been working. "I can work with this." "Wonderful. Now let me show you your room." She followed him back through the main room and up a staircase to the second floor. The upper hallway had 4 doors, all closed. Ezra opened the first one on the right. "This will be yours," he said, stepping aside so she could enter. The room was not large, but to Faye it seemed like a palace. A single bed with a real mattress stood against one wall, covered with a quilt in a pattern of blue and white. A small dresser, a table with a basin and pitcher for washing, a chair by the window, and a wardrobe for clothes completed the furnishings. The window looked out over the ranch, and though it was nearly dark now, she could see the shapes of the barn and corrals below. "My room is at the other end of the hall," Ezra said from the doorway. "The middle 2 rooms are for guests, though I rarely have any. There is a bathing room downstairs off the kitchen with a tub if you want a bath. I can heat water for you." Faye set her small bundle down on the bed, her hand resting on the quilt. The fabric was soft and clean, and the bed looked more comfortable than anywhere she had slept in years. "This is mine," she asked, not quite believing it. "It is yours," Ezra confirmed. "Take whatever time you need to settle in. I am going to go tell the men the good news that we will have decent meals starting tomorrow. If you need anything, just call down. I will be around." He left, closing the door behind him, and Faye was alone in her new room. She sank down onto the bed, testing its give, and then lay back fully, staring up at the ceiling. The mattress was stuffed with something soft, maybe feathers or cotton, nothing like the thin corn husk mat she had been sleeping on above the livery. This could not last. Good things did not happen to her. Something would go wrong, as it always did, and she would find herself on the road again. But for tonight, she had a bed and a roof and the promise of breakfast in the morning. That was more than she had expected when she woke up this morning. After a while, she roused herself and made her way back downstairs. She found the bathing room Ezra had mentioned, a small space with a large metal tub and a water pump. Someone, probably Ezra, had already filled the tub with cold water, and there were buckets of hot water from the stove sitting nearby. The kindness of the gesture made her chest ache in an unfamiliar way. She mixed the hot water into the cold until the temperature was comfortable, then stripped off her dirty dress and lowered herself into the tub. The warmth soaked into her tired muscles, easing the pain in her ankle and the general exhaustion in her bones. She scrubbed herself clean with the bar of soap provided, washing away the dirt of the road and the alley behind the saloon. When she finally emerged and dried herself with the towel hanging nearby, she felt more human than she had in months. She put on her spare dress, which was cleaner if no less worn than the other, and returned to her room where she hung the dirty dress on a peg to wash later. Sleep came quickly once she lay down, pulling her under into dreamless darkness. Morning arrived with sunlight streaming through her window and the sound of men's voices outside. Faye woke disoriented, unsure for a moment where she was. Then memory returned. The dancing ranch, Ezra Xanders, the job. She sat up quickly, noting the angle of the sun. It was later than she usually woke, probably close to 6 in the morning. The men would be expecting breakfast. She dressed hurriedly and made her way downstairs to the kitchen. Ezra was already there, poking ineffectually at the stove. He looked up when she entered, relief washing over his features. "Good morning. I was trying to get the fire going to boil coffee, but I think I am making it worse." Faye moved to the stove, assessing the situation. The fire was too hot and built wrong for cooking. "You need to let me handle this," she said, not unkindly. "How many for breakfast?" "7, including me. The men usually eat around 6:30 before starting work for the day." Faye glanced at the clock on the wall. 6:15. That gave her 15 minutes. "I will need your help. Can you fetch eggs from the chicken coop? 2 dozen. And bring butter from the cold storage if you have any." "On it," Ezra said, heading for the door with what seemed like relief at having clear instructions. Faye worked quickly, adjusting the fire and setting a large skillet on to heat. She found flour, salt, and lard for biscuits and began mixing the dough with practiced efficiency. While the biscuits baked, she would fry eggs and bacon. It was simple food, but hearty and hot, which was what working men needed. Ezra returned with a basket of eggs and a crock of butter. "What else can I do?" "Set the table," Faye said, rolling out biscuit dough on the work surface. "Plates, cups, forks, and make the coffee if you know how. I will fix it if needed." They worked together in companionable silence, Ezra following her instructions and Faye focusing on the cooking. She sliced bacon and laid it in the hot skillet, where it sizzled and filled the kitchen with a rich, smoky scent. The biscuits went into the oven. When Ezra finished setting the table, she had him crack eggs into a bowl while she flipped the bacon. By 6:30, breakfast was ready. Golden biscuits, crispy bacon, eggs fried in the bacon fat, and coffee that Faye had rescued from Ezra's attempts by adding more grounds and letting it boil properly. The ranch hands began filing in, drawn by the smells and the promise of a real meal. They were a varied group, ranging in age from young men barely into their 20s to a grizzled older cowboy with gray in his beard. All of them looked at Faye with curiosity and cautious optimism as they took their seats at the table. "Men, this is Miss Faye Davidson," Ezra announced from his place at the head of the table. "She will be our new cook and housekeeper. I expect you all to treat her with respect and courtesy. Miss Davidson, these are my ranch hands, Thomas, James, Robert, William, Daniel, and Patrick." The men nodded and murmured greetings. One of the younger ones, Thomas, spoke up. "No offense meant, Miss Davidson, but can you actually cook? We have had some rough meals lately." "Try the food and judge for yourself," Faye said, bringing platters to the table. The men needed no further encouragement. They loaded their plates and began eating with the focused intensity of hungry workers. For several minutes, the only sounds were the clink of forks on plates and appreciative grunts. Finally, the older cowboy, Patrick, sat back with a satisfied sigh. "Madam, that is the best breakfast I have had in 2 years. If lunch and dinner are half as good, you will have 6 very happy men on your hands." The others voiced their agreement, and Faye felt a small spark of something she did not quite recognize. Pride, maybe, or satisfaction. She had provided something people needed and they appreciated it. The feeling was foreign but not unpleasant. After breakfast, the men headed out to their work, leaving Faye to clean up the kitchen. Ezra stayed behind, helping her carry dishes to the basin. "You do not have to help," Faye said. "You have a ranch to run." "I have good men who know their jobs," Ezra replied, rolling up his sleeves. "And besides, I like helping. You did a wonderful job with breakfast. The men were right, that was excellent. It was just eggs and bacon. Maybe, but you made it well, and that matters." He began pumping water into the basin. "Tell me something, Miss Davidson. Have you always been so reluctant to accept compliments?" The question caught her off guard. "I just do not see the point in making a fuss over doing what is expected." "But you did more than what was expected. You made a meal that brought joy to 7 tired men. That is worth acknowledging." Faye did not know how to respond to that, so she focused on washing the dishes. Ezra worked beside her, drying the plates and stacking them on the shelves. His presence was easy and undemanding, which somehow made it more difficult to maintain her usual defensive distance. "Why are you so cheerful all the time?" she asked abruptly. "Is nothing ever wrong in your life?" Ezra laughed, a warm sound that filled the kitchen. "Plenty is wrong. The east pasture fence needs replacing before winter. 3 of my cows are showing signs of illness that I need to watch. The price of beef has dropped, which will affect my profits. I have not slept more than 5 hours a night in 2 months because there is always something that needs doing." "Should I go on?" "But you smile anyway." "I do," he agreed. "Because there is also plenty that is right. I have healthy cattle, good land, loyal men working for me, and as of today, the promise of decent meals. My uncle taught me something before he died. He said that life will hand you troubles no matter what, but you get to choose whether you let those troubles define your days. I choose to focus on the good where I can find it." "That seems naive," Faye said, scrubbing hard at a stubborn bit of egg on a plate. "Maybe," Ezra said thoughtfully. "Or maybe it is just a different way of surviving. You have your way, I have mine. Neither is wrong." His lack of defensiveness surprised her. She had expected him to argue or try to convince her of his philosophy. Instead, he simply acknowledged her view and maintained his own. It was disarming. They finished the dishes in silence, and then Ezra excused himself to begin his workday. Faye spent the morning cleaning the kitchen properly, washing down surfaces and organizing supplies. She made a list of items needed from the general store, planning out meals for the coming week. At noon, she prepared a simple lunch of sandwiches and soup, which the men ate quickly before returning to work. The days settled into a routine. Faye rose early to make breakfast, spent her mornings cleaning and preparing lunch, dedicated her afternoons to baking bread or preparing dinner, and her evenings to necessary tasks like laundry and mending. The work was hard and constant, but she had a comfortable bed to sleep in and enough food to eat. The men treated her with respect, and Ezra continued to be unfailingly kind. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Faye waited for the other shoe to drop, for the inevitable moment when everything would fall apart. It never came. Instead, small changes began to creep into her carefully guarded existence. She found herself humming while she worked, old songs her mother had taught her that she had not thought of in years. She started taking pride in her cooking, trying new recipes and enjoying the men's reactions when they liked something she made. She even began to feel a sense of belonging, as if the dancing ranch was becoming something like a home. Ezra was the greatest mystery to her. His cheerfulness never wavered, but she began to see that it was not naivety or ignorance of life's hardships. He worked harder than any man on the ranch, often waking before dawn and working until after dark. She saw him nurse sick cattle through the night, repair fences in the pouring rain, and handle a dozen crises with patient determination. Yet through it all, he maintained his fundamental joy in the life he had built. One afternoon in early October, Faye was in the kitchen kneading bread dough when Ezra came in looking troubled. It was the first time she had seen him without his usual smile, and it startled her. "Is something wrong?" she asked. Ezra ran a hand through his hair, leaving flour marks from the dust outside. "We lost 2 calves to wolves last night. Patrick found them this morning in the north pasture. I am going to have to organize a hunt, track down the pack before they take more cattle." "That sounds dangerous." "It can be, but it is necessary. Wolves are just doing what wolves do, trying to survive, but I cannot let them decimate my herd." He sighed. "I hate having to kill them. I know that probably sounds foolish to you." "No," Faye said quietly. "It sounds kind." Ezra looked at her, surprise flickering in his eyes. It was one of the first genuinely kind things she had said to him, and they both seemed to realize it at the same moment. The air between them shifted somehow, becoming charged with an awareness that had not been there before. "I should get back to work," Ezra said, but he did not move toward the door. "You have flour in your hair," Faye said, equally unable to look away. He reached up to brush at his hair, missing the spot entirely. Without thinking, Faye stepped closer and reached up to dust the flour away herself. Her fingers brushed through his dark hair, and she became suddenly, intensely aware of how close they were standing. She could see flecks of gold in his brown eyes and smell the scent of sun and leather that clung to him. Faye jerked her hand back as if burned, stepping away quickly. "Sorry. I should not have." "It is all right," Ezra said, his voice rougher than usual. "Thank you." He left quickly, and Faye turned back to her bread dough with trembling hands. Something had just happened, something that frightened her far more than losing a job or going hungry. She had felt something, a spark of attraction or connection or whatever people called it when they began to care about someone. It was dangerous. Caring led to loss, and loss led to pain. She had learned that lesson well. But over the following days, Faye found it increasingly difficult to maintain her emotional distance. She noticed things about Ezra she had not allowed herself to see before. The way he always thanked her for meals, as if she were doing something special rather than just her job. The way he gentled wild horses with patience and soft words. The way he defended one of the younger ranch hands when a mistake was made, taking responsibility himself rather than allowing the boy to be shamed. She found herself watching for him, listening for his voice, and looking forward to the moments when he would come into the kitchen for coffee or to help with dishes. It terrified her. One Sunday, her day off, Ezra asked if she would like to ride into town with him. He needed supplies from the general store, and he thought she might enjoy the outing. Faye almost said no, knowing that spending time with him outside of work would only make things worse. But the word that came out of her mouth was yes. They took the wagon, Ezra driving while Faye sat beside him on the bench seat. It was a beautiful autumn day, the sky impossibly blue and the air crisp with the promise of winter. The leaves on the scattered cottonwood trees along the road had turned gold, shimmering in the breeze. "I forgot to tell you," Ezra said as they traveled. "The men asked me to give you their thanks. Apparently the other ranches have been commenting on how well fed my crew looks. It is making them jealous." Faye allowed herself a small smile. "I am just doing my job." "You are doing it exceptionally well, and not just the cooking. The house has never been so clean and organized. I found matching socks in my drawer yesterday. I did not even know I had matching socks." She laughed despite herself, a sound she had not made in so long it felt rusty. Ezra glanced at her, his face lighting up with pleasure at the sound. "You should laugh more often," he said. "You have a lovely laugh." Faye felt heat rise to her cheeks. "You should not say such things." "Why not? It is true." "Because I am your employee, it is not proper." Ezra was quiet for a moment, his hands steady on the reins. "You are right. I apologize. I do not want to make you uncomfortable. I enjoy your company, Miss Davidson. I hope that is not inappropriate to say." "I enjoy your company too," Faye admitted, the words escaping before she could stop them. "That is the problem." "Why is that a problem?" "Because nothing good lasts. Because every time I have ever cared about something or someone, I have lost them. Because happiness is for other people, not for me." The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Ezra pulled the wagon to a stop at the side of the road and turned to face her fully. "Who told you that?" he asked gently. "Who convinced you that you do not deserve happiness?" "Life did." "Experience. Reality." "Then they lied," Ezra said firmly. "Every person deserves happiness, Miss Davidson, including you, especially you." You do not know what you are talking about, Faye said, her voice breaking. You have always had a home, a place where you belong. You had an uncle who loved you enough to leave you his ranch. You have never been alone in the world with nothing and no one. You are right, Ezra acknowledged. I have been blessed in ways you have not, and I do not claim to understand what you have been through. But I do know this. Your past does not have to define your future. You get to decide that. It is not that simple. Maybe not. But maybe it is also not as complicated as you think. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. His palm was warm and calloused, his grip gentle. You have been at the ranch for 6 weeks now. In that time, have you been happy at all? Even a little. Faye wanted to deny it to maintain the walls she had built around herself. But his touch and the genuine concern in his eyes made her want to tell the truth. Yes, she whispered, more than I expected to be, more than I thought possible. Then that is a start, Ezra said. Happiness does not have to be some grand, perfect thing. It can be small moments. A good meal. A comfortable bed. A beautiful day. And maybe, if you let it, it can be more than that. He released her hand and picked up the reins again, urging the horses forward. They rode in silence for a while, Faye processing his words. The idea that she could choose happiness, that it was not something reserved for other people but something she could have for herself, was almost too large to fit in her mind. When they reached Opal, Ezra helped her down from the wagon, his hands spanning her waist for a brief moment before he released her. They walked together to the general store, where the proprietor greeted Ezra warmly and looked at Faye with curiosity. This is Miss Faye Davidson, Ezra introduced her. She is my cook and housekeeper at the Dancing E. She may come by with supply lists from time to time. The proprietor, a portly man named Mr. Henderson, nodded respectfully. Pleasure to meet you, Miss Davidson. Any friend of Mr. Xanders is welcome here. They spent an hour gathering supplies, flour, sugar, coffee, spices, and various other items Faye needed for cooking. Ezra insisted on buying her a bolt of blue fabric when she admired it, saying she should have material for a new dress. Faye protested, but he waved away her objections. Consider it a bonus for excellent work. You have earned it. As they were loading the supplies into the wagon, a woman's voice called out behind them. Ezra Xanders, is that you? Faye turned to see a beautiful woman approaching, dressed in an expensive traveling suit of deep green. She was perhaps 23 or 24, with golden hair styled elaborately and a face that belonged in a fashion magazine. Behind her came an older couple, clearly her parents, dressed equally well. Ezra's expression grew cautious. Hello, Caroline, Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell. I did not know you were back in town. We arrived yesterday, the woman, Caroline, said brightly. We have been in Denver for the past 6 months. Papa has business interests there, as you know, but we decided to return to Opal for the winter. You know how I love it here. Her eyes drifted to Faye, assessment and dismissal flickering across her features in an instant. And who is this? This is Miss Faye Davidson, Ezra said. She works at my ranch. Miss Davidson, this is Miss Caroline Hartwell and her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell. They own the bank in town. How nice, Caroline said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. She turned her full attention back to Ezra. You simply must come to dinner this week. Mama is hosting a party and she would be devastated if you did not attend. You know how fond she is of you. I am quite busy with the ranch, Ezra said diplomatically. Oh, nonsense. Surely you can spare one evening for old friends. Caroline laid a gloved hand on his arm, her smile intimate and proprietary. Faye felt something twist in her chest, an ugly emotion she recognized as jealousy. She had no right to it. Ezra was not hers, would never be hers. He was her employer, nothing more, and women like Caroline Hartwell, beautiful and wealthy and confident, were the type of women men like Ezra married. "I will check my schedule," Ezra said, gently removing his arm from Caroline's grasp. "Please give your mother my regards." "I will hold you to that," Caroline said, her smile taking on a calculated edge. She nodded to Faye with barely concealed condescension. "Good day, Miss Davidson." The Hartwells moved on, and Ezra turned back to the wagon with a sigh. "I apologize for that. Why, she seems very fond of you." Faye kept her voice neutral, climbing into the wagon without assistance. Ezra climbed up beside her and picked up the reins, but did not immediately start the horses moving. "Caroline and I. There was a time when her parents hoped we would make a match. She is beautiful and accomplished, from a good family. On paper, it would be a sensible marriage." "But," Faye asked, not sure why she was torturing herself with this conversation, "but I have never felt anything for her beyond friendship, and even that has faded. She is vain and unkind to people she considers beneath her. I saw how she looked at you just now, and it made me angry. You are worth 10 of her, Miss Davidson." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made Faye's heart stutter. "You do not have to say that. I am not saying it because I have to. I am saying it because it is true." He turned to look at her, his brown eyes intense. "I do not care about money or social standing. I care about character and kindness and strength. You have survived things that would have broken most people, and you are still standing. That means something." Faye looked away, overwhelmed. "I think we should head back to the ranch." Ezra nodded and started the horses moving, but the atmosphere between them had changed again. Something had been acknowledged, even if neither of them was ready to name it yet. The weeks that followed were a strange mixture of torture and joy for Faye. She was increasingly aware of her feelings for Ezra, feelings that grew stronger with every passing day despite her attempts to suppress them. She noticed everything about him: the way he threw his head back when he laughed, the careful gentleness of his hands with injured animals, the furrow that appeared between his brows when he was concentrating on ranch accounts. She also noticed how other women reacted to him. Caroline Hartwell began finding excuses to visit the ranch, always dressed impeccably and bringing some offering. Cake from the bakery, an invitation to a social event, or simply her company. Ezra was polite but distant, and Faye observed that he never invited Caroline to stay longer or encouraged her visits. Still, Caroline's presence was a constant reminder of the gulf between Faye's position and what would be considered a suitable match for a successful rancher. In mid-November, the first major snowstorm of the season struck. The temperature plummeted, and snow fell steadily for 3 days. The ranch hands worked tirelessly to bring the cattle to shelter and ensure the animals had food and water. Faye kept coffee and hot food ready around the clock, knowing the men would be coming in and out at all hours. On the second night of the storm, Ezra came in near midnight, snow crusted in his hair and eyebrows, his clothes soaked through. He was shivering violently, and Faye immediately sprang into action. "You need to get out of those wet clothes before you catch your death," she said, already moving to the stove to heat water for coffee and broth. "I am fine," Ezra said, his teeth chattering so hard he could barely speak. "You are not fine. You are hypothermic. Go upstairs, put on dry clothes, and get under blankets. I will bring you hot coffee and soup." For once, Ezra did not argue. He disappeared upstairs, moving slowly as if every step required great effort. Faye worked quickly, heating beef broth and pouring strong, sweet coffee. She added whiskey to both, knowing it would help warm him from the inside. When she carried the tray upstairs and knocked on his door, his voice called out weakly, "Come in." She found him in bed, buried under several quilts, still shivering. She set the tray on the bedside table and helped him sit up enough to drink. He took the coffee cup in trembling hands, and she wrapped her own hands around his to help steady them. "Drink slowly," she instructed. "Little sips." He obeyed, and gradually the shivering began to subside. When he finished the coffee, she handed him the bowl of broth, which he drank more easily. Color was returning to his face and his hands had steadied. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I think I pushed myself too hard out there." "You need to rest. The men can handle things for a few hours. The men are just as exhausted as I am. We still have 200 head unaccounted for in the north pasture. If they are not brought in tonight, they will freeze or starve." Faye understood the reality of ranching well enough to know he was right, but she also knew that Ezra would be no good to anyone if he worked himself to death. "Then rest for 2 hours. I will wake you when it is time to go back out." Ezra looked at her for a long moment, something vulnerable and raw in his expression. "Why do you care so much? You have worked here less than 2 months. I am just your employer." The question hung between them, demanding honesty. Faye could lie, could maintain the pretense that her concern was professional, but she was so tired of lying, especially to herself. "Because you are not just my employer," she said softly. "Because you have shown me kindness when I expected none. Because you see me as a person, not just a servant. Because you make me believe that maybe, just maybe, I deserve happiness after all." Ezra sat up straighter, the quilts falling away from his shoulders. "Faye." It was the first time he had used her first name, and the sound of it on his lips made her breath catch. "I should go," she said quickly, standing. "You need to rest." His hand shot out, catching hers before she could step away. "Wait, please." She froze, her hand warm in his. "Ezra, this is not proper." "I do not care about proper right now," he said. "I need to tell you something, and I need to tell you before I lose my nerve. I have been trying to fight this, trying to maintain appropriate distance because you work for me and I do not want to take advantage. But I cannot do it anymore." "Do not," Faye whispered. "Do not say it." "I have to. I am falling in love with you." "No, that is not right. I have already fallen. I think I started falling the day you walked up to my ranch, limping and dirty and too proud to admit you needed help." Tears sprang to Faye's eyes. "You cannot love me. I am nobody. I have nothing. Caroline Hartwell or someone like her is who you should be with. Caroline Hartwell is shallow and cruel, and I would rather die alone than marry her. You are brave and strong and kind underneath all those walls you have built. You make me laugh. You make me think. You make me want to be better." That is what love is, Faye. Not social standing or family connections, but this feeling in my chest every time I see you. "What if it does not last?" Faye asked, her voice breaking. "What if you realize I am not what you thought? What if I lose you like I have lost everything else?" Ezra pulled gently on her hand, drawing her closer until she was sitting on the edge of his bed. With his free hand, he reached up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "Nothing in life is guaranteed," he said. "I could go out in that storm tomorrow and never come back. The ranch could fail. Any number of disasters could happen. But I have learned that living in fear of what might go wrong means missing out on what might go right. I want to take that chance with you, Faye, if you will let me." She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch despite every instinct telling her to run. When she opened them again, his face was so close she could count his eyelashes. "I am terrified," she admitted. "So am I," he said with a small smile. "Love is terrifying, but it is also wonderful. Let me show you. Let me prove to you that happiness is not for other people, it is for you too." "I do not know how," she whispered. "Then we will figure it out together." He leaned forward slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle and sweet, full of promise rather than demand. Faye felt something inside her crack open, all the carefully guarded walls beginning to crumble. She kissed him back, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ezra rested his forehead against hers. "I meant what I said. I love you, Faye Davidson." "I think I love you too," Faye said, the words feeling strange and wonderful on her tongue. "I have been trying so hard not to, but I do." "Then stop trying not to. Let yourself feel it." They sat there for a long moment, holding each other, until Faye finally pulled back with a rueful smile. "You need to rest, and I need to go back downstairs before I forget that there are 6 other men on this ranch who might need feeding." Ezra laughed, lying back against the pillows. "Practical as always. That is one of the many things I love about you." Faye stood, picking up the empty tray, but paused at the door to look back at him. "Ezra, when you go back out there, please be careful. I have only just admitted I love you. I would like the chance to tell you again." "I will be careful," he promised. "I have something to come back for now." Over the following weeks, as winter settled in earnest over the ranch, Faye and Ezra navigated their new relationship carefully. They kept their affection private, both for propriety's sake and because Faye was not yet ready to face the inevitable gossip and judgment that would come. The ranch hands suspected something had changed but were too polite or too wise to comment. Caroline Hartwell, however, was less subtle. She arrived one December afternoon with her mother, ostensibly to deliver Christmas cookies to the ranch. Faye was in the kitchen when they entered, and she heard Caroline's voice ring out through the house. "Ezra, where are you hiding?" Ezra emerged from his office, his expression carefully neutral. "Caroline, Mrs. Hartwell, this is unexpected. We wanted to bring you some treats for the holiday," Mrs. Hartwell said, her voice as saccharine as her daughter's. "Caroline made them herself. Well, supervised their making, at least." Caroline laughed, a practiced, tinkling sound. "Oh, Mama, you know I am hopeless in the kitchen. That is what servants are for." Faye felt her jaw tighten at the casual dismissal of people who worked with their hands. She continued kneading the bread dough on the table, keeping her eyes on her work. "That is kind of you," Ezra said, "but unnecessary. We have everything we need here." "Surely you are not planning to spend Christmas alone on this ranch?" Caroline asked, moving closer to him. "You must come to our Christmas Eve party. Everyone who is anyone will be there." "I have plans," Ezra said firmly. "What plans? Sitting in this house with only your ranch hands for company, that is no way to spend the holiday." "Actually, I am spending it with someone very important to me." Caroline's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Ezra turned and looked directly at Faye, his expression warm and proud. "Faye and I are spending Christmas together." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Caroline followed his gaze to Faye, understanding dawning on her beautiful face. "The cook." "You are spending Christmas with the cook." "I am spending Christmas with the woman I love," Ezra corrected, his voice hardening. "Faye is not just a cook. She is kind, brave, and remarkable, and I am lucky to have her in my life." Mrs. Hartwell gasped. "Ezra, surely you are not serious." "She is a servant. You cannot possibly be considering." "I am very serious," Ezra interrupted. "In fact, I should tell you now since it will be public knowledge soon enough. I intend to ask Faye to marry me." Faye's hands stilled in the bread dough, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. He had not mentioned marriage before, though they had talked about a future together in vague terms. Hearing him declare it so boldly, defending her against Caroline's contempt, made something fierce and warm bloom in her chest. Caroline's face had gone pale with rage. "This is ridiculous. She is a nobody. She has no family, no money, no breeding. You would throw away everything for some drifter." "I would ask you to leave now," Ezra said, his voice cold in a way Faye had never heard before. "And I will thank you not to return unless you can show respect to the woman who will be my wife." "Your uncle would be ashamed," Mrs. Hartwell said stiffly, gathering her skirts. "He left you this ranch expecting you to make something of yourself, not to throw it all away on an unsuitable match. My uncle taught me that character matters more than circumstance. I think he would approve very much of Faye. Now please leave." The Hartwells swept out, Caroline shooting Faye a look of pure venom as she passed. The door slammed behind them and silence filled the house. Slowly, Ezra turned to face Faye. "I apologize," he said. "I should have discussed that with you first before announcing it to the world. I just could not stand there and let them talk about you that way." Faye wiped her hands clean and walked over to him, her heart in her throat. "Did you mean it? About marriage? Every word?" "I have been trying to find the right way to ask you properly, but apparently I just blurted it out in anger instead." He took her hands in his. "This is not how I planned this, but, Faye Davidson, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to convince you that you deserve all the happiness in the world?" Faye looked up at him. This man who had seen through her defenses to the lonely, hurting person underneath, and had chosen to love her anyway. The old fears tried to rise up, whispering that this could not last, that something would go wrong. But for the first time she pushed those fears aside and chose to believe in something better. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I will marry you." Ezra pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. They were both laughing and crying, the joy too large to be contained. When he set her down, he kissed her deeply, and Faye let herself feel it all. The love, the hope, the tentative belief that maybe happiness was for her after all. They were married on a bright, cold day in January of 1884. The ceremony was held in the small church in Opal, officiated by the same pastor whose wife had once accused Faye of theft. The woman had the grace to look ashamed when Faye walked down the aisle on the arm of Patrick, the older ranch hand who had offered to give her away. The church was full despite the cold. All the ranch hands attended, dressed in their Sunday best. Several townspeople came as well, curious about the unusual match or genuinely happy for the couple. Notably absent were the Hartwells and their social circle, but Faye did not miss them. She wore a dress she had made herself from the blue fabric Ezra had bought her, simple but beautiful. Ezra stood at the altar in a new suit, his face glowing with happiness as she approached. When she reached him, he took her hands and whispered, "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." The vows were traditional, but when Ezra promised to love and cherish her all the days of his life, Faye believed him. When she promised the same, she meant it with her whole heart. They exchanged simple gold bands, and when the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Ezra kissed her with such tenderness that several of the ladies in attendance sighed. The reception was held at the ranch, with the main room transformed by garlands of evergreen, and a long table laden with food that Faye had prepared over several days. The ranch hands had strung lanterns from the rafters, casting warm light over everything. Someone produced a fiddle, another a guitar, and impromptu music filled the house. Ezra led Faye in a waltz, and though neither of them were experienced dancers, they moved together with easy grace, lost in each other's eyes. When the song ended, he pulled her close and whispered, "Thank you for taking a chance on me." "Thank you for not giving up on me," Faye whispered back. The celebration continued into the evening with laughter and music and more food than anyone could possibly eat. Faye found herself surrounded by good wishes and genuine warmth. These people, the ranch hands and townspeople who had attended, were becoming something like family. The thought was both strange and wonderful. Late that night, after the guests had departed and the house had grown quiet, Ezra and Faye stood together on the porch, looking out at the snow-covered landscape. The moon was bright, turning everything silver and ethereal. "What are you thinking?" Ezra asked, his arm around her waist. "I am thinking that 6 months ago I was sleeping in a stable and believing I would die alone and unmourned. Now I am married to a wonderful man, standing in front of a house that is my home. It does not seem real." "It is real," Ezra assured her. "All of this is real. Your happiness is real. And it is only the beginning, Faye. We have our whole lives ahead of us." She leaned into him, letting herself feel the full weight of that promise. "I am still scared sometimes," she admitted. "Scared that I will wake up and this will all be gone. Then I will just have to keep proving to you every day that it is real. I can do that. I want to do that." They stood there for a while longer, watching the stars wheel slowly across the sky, before finally going inside to begin their life together. The years that followed were not without challenges. The ranch faced hard winters and dry summers, cattle diseases and financial pressures. Faye and Ezra had disagreements like any couple, learning to navigate two strong wills and different perspectives. But through it all, the foundation of love and respect they had built remained solid. Faye bloomed in the security of Ezra's love. The wary, defensive woman who had first arrived at the Dancing E Ranch gradually transformed into someone more open and confident. She began to make friends among the townspeople, her excellent cooking and genuine kindness winning over even those who had initially been skeptical of her marriage to Ezra. She took over managing the household accounts and proved to have a keen head for numbers, helping Ezra make decisions about the ranch's finances. In the summer of 1885, Faye discovered she was pregnant. The news brought a complicated mixture of joy and terror. The thought of bringing a child into the world, of being responsible for another life, awakened all her old fears. What if something went wrong? What if she failed? Ezra held her through the panic, his steady presence an anchor. "You are going to be an amazing mother," he told her. "You have so much love inside you, Faye. I have seen it in how you care for the ranch hands, how you tend the garden, how you look after every stray animal that wanders onto our property. Our child will be so lucky to have you. What if I do not know how? My mother has been gone so long, and I barely remember what she taught me. Then we will figure it out together, the way we figure out everything else. You are not alone anymore, Faye. You will never be alone again." Their son was born in March of 1886, during a late snowstorm that kept the doctor from arriving in time. Faye labored through the night with only Ezra and Mrs. Chen, the midwife from town who happened to be visiting a neighbor when the storm hit. The birth was hard, and there were moments when Faye was certain she would not survive it. But just before dawn, their son entered the world with a lusty cry that announced his arrival to everyone within earshot. Ezra wept as he held his son for the first time, his big hands so careful with the tiny bundle. "He is perfect," he said in wonder. "Faye, look what we made." They named him Ethan, after Ezra's beloved uncle. Faye had suggested it, knowing how much Ezra had loved the man who had given him his start in life. As she held her son and watched her husband's face, Faye felt something shift inside her, a final piece falling into place. This was her family. These people belonged to her, and she belonged to them. The concept of belonging, which had been so foreign for so long, now felt as natural as breathing. Motherhood was harder than Faye had imagined, but also more rewarding. Ethan was a healthy, happy baby who seemed to have inherited his father's sunny disposition. The ranch hands doted on him, and Patrick in particular became a surrogate grandfather, carving wooden toys and telling stories from his long life. As Ethan grew, two more children followed, a daughter named Emma in 1888 and another son named Lee in 1890. The house that had once seemed so quiet was now filled with the sounds of children laughing and playing, of family meals around the table, of bedtime stories and lullabies. Faye still had moments of fear, times when she would wake in the night and check to make sure everyone she loved was still breathing, still safe. But those moments grew less frequent as the years passed, and nothing terrible happened. Ezra's steady love and the daily proof of their life together gradually healed the old wounds. In 1892, a decade after Faye had first walked up to the dancing ranch expecting nothing, she stood in the same spot with Ezra beside her, watching their three children play in the yard. Ethan, now 6, was teaching Emma how to throw a ball while baby Ellie toddled after them on unsteady legs. "What are you thinking about?" Ezra asked, a question he had posed countless times over the years. Faye smiled, the expression coming easily now. "I am thinking that I was wrong. For so many years I believed happiness was for other people, that I did not deserve it or could not have it. But you proved me wrong. You showed me that happiness was always meant for me too. I just had to be brave enough to reach for it." Ezra pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You were always brave, Faye. That is one of the first things I loved about you. You just needed someone to help you see it." "We helped each other see it," Faye corrected. "You taught me that joy is possible even when life is hard. And I think I helped you see that your kindness and optimism are not weaknesses, but strengths. We make a good team, the best team." They stood together watching their children, the ranch spreading out around them, healthy and prosperous. The dancing had grown over the years with their hard work and careful management. They had weathered droughts and harsh winters, economic downturns and personal challenges, but they had done it together. Emma squealed with delight as she successfully caught the ball Ethan had thrown, and Lee clapped his chubby hands in excitement. The sound of their children's laughter was the sweetest music Faye had ever heard. That evening, after the children were in bed and the house had settled into peaceful quiet, Faye and Ezra sat together in the main room. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Ezra was reviewing ranch accounts while Faye mended one of Ethan's shirts, torn during the day's play. "I was thinking," Ezra said, looking up from his ledger, "maybe it is time to expand the house. Add on a couple more bedrooms, perhaps a larger kitchen. What do you think?" Faye raised an eyebrow. "Are you planning on us having more children?" "I was thinking more about the future. Someday the children will be grown and married with families of their own. I want there to be room for everyone to come home." The thought of their children grown made Faye's heart ache sweetly. "That is a long time away still, I know, but I like to plan ahead." He set down his pen and came to sit beside her on the sofa. "I want this place to be what it has become for us, a real home, a place where people feel loved and safe, a place where happiness lives." Faye set aside her mending and took his hand. "It already is that. You made it that, Ezra. For me, for the children, for everyone who comes here." "We made it that," he corrected gently, echoing her earlier words. "Together." As the fire burned low and the night deepened, they sat together in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from years of companionship and deep understanding. Outside, an owl hooted in the darkness and the wind whispered through the eaves. Inside, all was warm and safe. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. Ethan proved to have his father's love of the land and his mother's practical nature. He started helping with ranch work as soon as he was old enough, showing a natural aptitude with horses. Emma was fierce and independent, more interested in reading books than domestic arts, and Faye encouraged her daughter's education despite raised eyebrows from some in town. Eli was the dreamer of the family, always building elaborate structures from whatever materials he could find, already talking about becoming an architect someday. Faye watched her children grow with a mixture of pride and bittersweetness. She made sure they knew they were loved, that they had a home they could always return to. She wanted them to have the security she had lacked as a child, but also the courage to pursue their dreams. In 1898, when Ethan was 12, he asked Faye about her life before she came to the ranch. They were in the garden together, harvesting vegetables for dinner when the question came. "Mama, what was it like before you met Papa?" Faye paused in her work, a basket of tomatoes balanced on her hip. "Why do you ask? I heard someone in town say something about you. About how you used to work at the saloon and had nothing. They made it sound like it was something to be ashamed of." Faye set down the basket and knelt in the dirt beside her son. "There is no shame in having been poor or having worked hard to survive. Before I met your father, I had a very difficult life. I lost my parents when I was young, and I spent years just trying to find a place where I belonged. There were times when I had nowhere to sleep and nothing to eat, times when I believed I would never be happy. But then you found Papa." "Yes. Or maybe he found me. Either way, he showed me that the things I believed about myself and my life were not true. He taught me that everyone deserves happiness, including me, including you, including everyone." Ethan digested this, his young face serious. "If someone says mean things about you again, can I punch them?" Despite the gravity of the conversation, Faye laughed. "No, you cannot punch them, but you can hold your head high, knowing that your mother survived things that would have broken other people, and that makes her strong, not shameful." "Can you do that?" "Yes, Mama, I am proud of you." The simple statement brought tears to Faye's eyes. She pulled her son into a tight hug, marveling at how tall he was getting. "I am proud of you too, my darling boy, so proud." As the new century approached, the Dancing E Ranch was firmly established as one of the most successful operations in the territory. Ezra had invested wisely, diversifying beyond just cattle to include horse breeding and crop farming. He treated his workers fairly, paying good wages and ensuring decent living conditions, which meant he had his pick of the best ranch hands in the region. Faye had become something of a community leader, organizing charitable efforts to help families in need and working with the church to provide food and shelter for those who found themselves in circumstances similar to what she had once experienced. She never forgot what it was like to have nothing, and she made sure that anyone who came to her door hungry or homeless left with at least a meal, and often with job opportunities or other assistance. On a summer evening in 1899, the family gathered on the porch after dinner, a tradition they maintained whenever weather allowed. Ethan was 13 now, Emma 11, and Ellie 9. The children were arguing good-naturedly about something while Ezra whittled a piece of wood and Faye shelled peas for the next day's meal. "Papa," Emma said suddenly, "tell us again about the day you and Mama met." "You have heard that story 100 times," Ezra said with amusement. "But I like it. Please?" Ezra glanced at Faye, who smiled and nodded. "All right. It was a late afternoon in September, 17 years ago. I had just posted a notice in town looking for a cook because my ranch hands were about to mutiny over my terrible cooking." As Ezra told the familiar story, embellishing certain details for dramatic effect while the children laughed, Faye watched her family with a full heart. This moment, this ordinary evening filled with love and laughter, was more than she had ever dared to dream of during those hard, lonely years. When the story ended, Ellie piped up, "And then you lived happily ever after, right?" "That is right," Ezra confirmed, reaching over to take Faye's hand. "We lived and are living happily ever after." "But happily ever after does not mean nothing bad ever happens," Faye added, wanting her children to understand this important truth. "It means that even when hard things happen, you face them together with the people you love. That is what makes it happy." The children nodded, processing this wisdom, and then Emma asked if they could have dessert, effectively ending the philosophical discussion. As Faye went inside to fetch the pie she had made earlier, Ezra followed her into the kitchen. "That was well said," he told her. "About happily ever after. I learned it from you. You showed me that happiness is not the absence of problems, but the presence of love." Ezra pulled her into his arms, holding her close in the quiet kitchen. "I love you, Faye Xanders, more today than yesterday and less than I will tomorrow." "I love you too," Faye said, the words still feeling like a gift even after all these years. "Thank you for not letting me walk away that first day. Thank you for seeing who I could be when I could not see it myself. Thank you for being brave enough to stay. Thank you for letting me love you." They stood there for a long moment, two people who had found each other against the odds and built something beautiful together. Outside, their children's voices called for dessert, and with a shared smile, Faye and Ezra returned to their family. The years continued their steady march forward. The children grew into young adults with dreams and ambitions of their own. Ethan took over more responsibility on the ranch, showing the same dedication and joyful approach to work that his father had always demonstrated. Emma went away to school in Denver, studying to become a teacher, writing home regularly with news of her studies and adventures. Eli apprenticed with an architect in Cheyenne, his childhood dreams taking concrete form. Faye and Ezra adapted to the changing seasons of their life together. Their hair grayed, lines deepened around their eyes and mouths, but the love between them only grew stronger. They had weathered storms literal and figurative, celebrated triumphs large and small, and built a legacy that extended beyond just the ranch. In 1910, on their 26th wedding anniversary, they took a rare day away from responsibilities to ride out to a meadow on the edge of their property, a place they had visited on their first anniversary and returned to whenever they could over the years. The grass was lush and green, wildflowers dotting the landscape in blues and yellows and whites. They spread a blanket and sat together, sharing a simple picnic lunch and watching clouds drift across the endless Wyoming sky. Faye was 50 years old now, though she felt younger than she had at 20. Love and security had given her a vitality that poverty and fear had stolen from her youth. "You ever think about that girl who walked up to the ranch all those years ago?" Ezra asked, as if reading her thoughts. "The one who believed happiness was for other people." "Sometimes," Faye admitted. "I think about her and wish I could tell her that everything was going to be all right, that she would find a home and a family. That she would know such joy it would make her afraid at first, but then it would become as natural as breathing. She found the courage to take a chance. That is what changed everything." "No," Faye corrected gently. "You changed everything. You were patient and kind and persistent. You did not let me hide behind my walls. You showed me that I was worthy of love." "We saved each other," Ezra said, a statement they had arrived at over many similar conversations through the years. "I needed you as much as you needed me. You brought purpose and depth to my optimism. You made me understand that joy means more when you have known sorrow." Faye leaned her head against his shoulder, comfortable in the silence that stretched between them. A hawk circled overhead, riding thermal currents with effortless grace. In the distance, she could see the roofline of their ranch house, the home that had become the center of so much love and life. "I was thinking," Ezra said after a while, We should start writing down our story, all of it, from the beginning to now, for the children and grandchildren. We do not have grandchildren yet, but we will, and I want them to know how their grandmother was the bravest person I ever met, how she survived things that would have broken others, how she learned to be happy even when she believed it was impossible. That is a legacy worth preserving. Faye sat up to look at him, this man who had been her partner and love for more than a quarter-century. His hair was more gray than dark now, and lines mapped his face like a familiar, beloved landscape. But his eyes still held that same warmth and joy that had first drawn her to him, and his smile still had the power to make her heart skip. "All right," she agreed. "We will write our story, together." And they did. Over the following months and years, Faye and Ezra spent their evenings recording their history, from Faye's difficult childhood to Ezra's inheritance of the ranch, from their first meeting to their wedding day to the birth of their children. They wrote about challenges faced and overcome, about the steady building of a life brick by brick. They wrote honestly about struggles and doubts, wanting their descendants to know that happiness was not the absence of difficulty, but the triumph over it. Ethan married in 1911, bringing his bride to live at the ranch and eventually taking over full management as Ezra stepped back to an advisory role. The first grandchild, a robust boy they named Edward, arrived in 1912, and Faye discovered that being a grandmother brought its own unique joy. She could spoil and love these children without the weight of full responsibility, delighting in their antics and marveling at how the legacy continued. Emma returned home periodically from her teaching position in Denver, each time with stories of her students and the changes sweeping through the state. She eventually married a fellow teacher, and though they remained in the city, they visited often, adding 2 more grandchildren to the family. Ellie became a successful architect, designing buildings across the West, including a new bank building in Opal that became the pride of the town. He married late in his 30s, but when he did, it was to a spirited woman who reminded Faye a bit of herself. Wary at first, but capable of deep love once she learned to trust. As Faye watched her children build their own lives and families, she often reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The girl who had believed happiness was, for other people, had become a woman who radiated contentment, who had learned that joy was not only possible but sustainable, who had built a life so full of love, it sometimes felt like her heart could not contain it all. In the summer of 1920, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. It was Faye and Ezra's 36th anniversary, and their children had organized a grand party. The house and yard were filled with 3 generations: children, grandchildren, ranch hands past and present, friends from town and neighbors from surrounding ranches. As the sun set and lanterns were lit, casting everything in warm, golden light, Ethan stood and called for everyone's attention. "I want to make a toast," he said, raising his glass. "To my parents, Ezra and Faye Xanders, who showed all of us what love really means. They built this ranch and this family through hard work and dedication, but more than that, they taught us that happiness is not something that happens to you. It is something you choose and create and share." Everyone raised their glasses, voices joining in agreement. Faye felt tears prick her eyes as she looked around at all these people. This community that had grown from one lonely woman walking up a dusty road and one kind man who had seen her worth. Later, when the party had wound down and most guests had departed or retired to the various bedrooms and outbuildings where they would spend the night, Faye and Ezra stood alone on the porch, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. "It has been a good life," Ezra said quietly. "Better than I could have imagined." It has, Faye agreed. Thank you for building it with me. Thank you for letting me. He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. If I could go back to that day in 1882 and do it all again, I would not change a single thing. Except maybe I would tell that terrified young woman walking toward my ranch that she was about to find everything she had been looking for. I would tell her that happiness was waiting for her if she was brave enough to accept it. She was brave enough, Faye said softly. Because you gave her a reason to be. You gave her hope and love and a place to belong. You showed her that happiness was not reserved for other people. It was meant for her too. Ezra pulled her close, and they swayed together gently, dancing to music only they could hear. The night was clear and cool, the stars brilliant overhead, and from inside the house came the muted sounds of their family settling in for the night. "I love you, Faye Xanders," Ezra murmured against her hair. "I have loved you from almost the first moment I saw you, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "I love you too," Faye replied, her voice thick with emotion. "You were the joyful rancher who proved that happiness was meant for me too. You taught me that I deserved love and joy and all the good things I thought were impossible. You gave me everything." They stood together as the stars wheeled overhead, two people who had found each other against the odds and had built something beautiful and lasting. The dancing ranch slept peacefully around them, a testament to what could be created when love and determination combined. Their story, written down in careful handwriting and preserved for future generations, would tell of hardship overcome and joy earned. But more than that, it would tell the truth that Faye had learned and wanted to pass on. That happiness is not reserved for a lucky few, but is possible for anyone brave enough to believe in it and work for it. As the night deepened and they finally went inside to their own bed, Faye felt the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. She had gone from believing she was unworthy of happiness to understanding that she was not only worthy, but capable of creating joy for herself and others. She had learned that love was not something to fear, but something to embrace, not a weakness but the greatest strength of all. The years that followed continued the pattern of life well lived. There were losses, as was inevitable. Patrick, the old ranch hand who had given Faye away at her wedding, passed peacefully in his sleep in 1923. Several of the original ranch hands retired or moved on to other ventures. Friends and neighbors aged and died, each loss a reminder of mortality's steady march. But there were also countless joys. More grandchildren arrived, eventually numbering 9 in total. Each one learned to ride horses on the ranch, helped gather eggs from the chicken coop, and listened to their grandmother's stories of the old days. Faye made sure each one knew they were loved unconditionally, that they always had a home to return to. That happiness was their birthright if they chose to claim it. In 1925, on a bright April morning when the meadows were just beginning to green and the first wildflowers were pushing through the earth, Ezra had a heart attack while out riding fence lines. He made it back to the ranch, but died in Faye's arms later that day, their children and grandchildren gathered around. His last words were, "It has been the greatest joy of my life to love you." The loss was devastating. For weeks, Faye moved through the world in a fog of grief, unable to fully accept that her partner of 41 years was gone. She had feared loss for so long in her youth, and now the worst had happened. The man who had taught her to be happy was no longer beside her. But as the initial shock faded and the reality settled in, Faye realized something important. The happiness Ezra had helped her find was not dependent on his presence. He had not given her happiness like a gift that could be taken away. He had taught her how to create it herself, how to find joy in daily moments, how to love and be loved. That knowledge, that capacity, remained. She continued living at the ranch, which Ethan now ran with his father's same dedication and joy. She took comfort in her children and grandchildren, in the routines of daily life, in the land she had come to love. She finished the written history she and Ezra had been working on, adding the final chapters about their last years together and what his life and love had meant. On the first anniversary of Ezra's death, Faye rode out to the meadow where they had spent their 26th anniversary, the place that had become special to them over the years. She brought flowers and the finished manuscript of their story. Sitting in the grass with the sun warm on her face, she spoke aloud as if Ezra could hear. "You were right about everything," she said. "Happiness is a choice. Love is worth the risk. I deserved all the good things that came to me. I know you are not really here to hear this, but I needed to say it anyway. Thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for loving me so completely that I could not help but love you back. Thank you for every day we had together." A breeze stirred the grass around her, carrying the scent of wildflowers and earth. Faye closed her eyes and let herself feel everything, the grief of loss, yes, but also the joy of having had such love. Ezra would want her to continue choosing happiness, to find pleasure in the daily moments, to love the people around her fully and without reservation. So that was what she did. Faye lived for another 12 years, reaching the age of 77. She spent those years being an active grandmother and great-grandmother, watching the family continue to grow and flourish. She saw Emma become a school principal, her influence shaping hundreds of young lives. She watched Ellie's architectural designs transform communities across the region. She took pride in Ethan's stewardship of the Dancing E, which remained prosperous and respected. She also continued her charitable work, never forgetting where she had come from. She helped establish a shelter in Opal for people facing hard times, and she funded scholarships for young people who wanted education, but lacked means. She made sure that others had the opportunities she had nearly missed. In the early summer of 1937, Faye fell ill with pneumonia. Despite the best efforts of doctors, she grew steadily weaker. Her children took turns sitting with her, keeping her company and holding her hand. As the end approached, Faye was not afraid. She had lived a full life, had loved and been loved, had created something of value. She was ready. On her last day, with all 3 of her children present, Faye spoke her final words. "Do not be sad," she whispered. "I have had more happiness than I ever thought possible. I have loved and been loved. That is everything." Emma leaned down to kiss her mother's forehead. "You taught us that, Mama. You and Papa both. You taught us how to be happy." Faye smiled, her eyes drifting closed. "Then I did something right." She passed peacefully that evening, and they buried her beside Ezra in the small cemetery on the ranch, under a cottonwood tree with a view of the mountains. The headstone was simple but perfect. Faye Davidson Xanders, 1860–1937. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, she learned that happiness was meant for her too. The Dancing E Ranch continued under Ethan's management and eventually passed to his children, the legacy continuing through the generations. The story that Faye and Ezra had written together was carefully preserved, passed down as a family treasure. Each generation that read it learned the same lessons: that happiness is possible even after great hardship, that love is worth the risk, that kindness and persistence can change lives. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun was setting and the land was bathed in golden light, family members would swear they could feel the presence of their ancestors. Not as ghosts, but as a kind of benevolent energy, a reminder that this place was built on love and remained sustained by it. The joyful rancher who had refused to let a lonely, broken woman walk away, And the brave woman who had dared to accept happiness when it was offered their story became the foundation on which all the rest was built. In a world that could be harsh and unforgiving, they had created a pocket of love and joy that endured long after they were gone. They had proven that happiness is not reserved for the lucky or privileged, but is available to anyone willing to be brave enough to believe in it, to work for it, and to accept it when it arrives in unexpected forms on dusty roads in Wyoming. Their story was one of transformation, from loneliness to belonging, from despair to hope, from the belief that happiness was for other people to the understanding that it was meant for them too. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy they could have left, the proof that love can heal, that kindness matters, and that every person, no matter how broken or lost they may feel, deserves and can find happiness if they are willing to let it in.